Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, January the 10th, 2022. Let's start by talking about truth, as in facts. Claude Coburn, the British journalist, late British journalist and novelist. He wrote a book called Beat the Devil, which was made into a film by John Huston. And one of his granddaughters is Olivia Wilde. He is was the patriarch of the Coburn journalistic clan, of which there are many. Evelyn Waugh once called him my communist cousin because he was a communist and they were cousins. He said, "It is evident to any thinking person that there are no neutral facts waiting around to be picked up like pebbles on the beach." Yes, quite true. But now, of course, we have decided that truth can be defined not by God, but by Reuters and Associated Press. This is from Business Insider. A scientist promoting anti-vaccine conspiracies attributed cooperation with COVID-19 measures like vaccination and mask wearing with mass formation psychosis during a December 31 Joe Rogan Experience podcast. In the segment, Dr. Robert Malone, who once researched mRNA technology but is critical of the COVID-19 vaccines developed with that technology, said mass psychosis has caused a third of the population basically being hypnotized to believe established facts about COVID-19. The segment has since been taken down by YouTube. Twitter has also shut down Malone's account for spreading vaccine falsehoods. So he's not legit because his interview was taken down by YouTube and Twitter has shut down his account. However, GOP Representative Troy Niels entered a full transcript of the podcast into the congressional record. Malone said that this psychosis is why people follow public health advice from experts like Dr. Anthony Fauci or choose to be vaccinated. Quote, "When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-flowing anxiety and a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it, and then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis, they literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere," unquote. Adding that this concept also occurred in Nazi Germany. However, psychology experts told the Associated Press that there's no actual support for Malone's claims. The term mass formation psychosis does not even show up in the American Psychological Association's dictionary of psychology. To my knowledge, there's no evidence whatsoever for this concept. J. Van Bavel, an assistant professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University, told the AP. Stephen Riker, a social psychology professor at the University of St. Andrews in the UK, told the AP that the concept has no academic credibility. Also in the UK, John Drury, a social psychologist at the University of Sussex, told the AP the idea of mass formation psychosis is similar to mob mentality, or the idea that people in a group will lose self-control and their identities. Concepts, he says, have been discredited by decades of research. No respectable psychologist agrees with these ideas now, Drury said. PolitiFact reported Malone previously said he'd received 2 doses of Moderna's vaccine, but claimed that jabs prolonged symptoms he got from a previous COVID-19 infection. Psychology. Maybe we should sic the fact checkers on psychology. Psychologists talk a lot about something called the mind. Now, does the mind exist? Well, we all believe it does. Can it be measured? Can it be located? No, it cannot. So it is not scientifically verifiable. But we still hear a great deal from psychologists and psychiatrists. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, had a whole bunch of ideas about why people act as they do. None of these ideas can be verified. Oh, I see. Little boys want to sleep with their mother and kill their father. Yeah, good luck proving that one. But I suppose there are still some people who believe in it. There is so much that we believe that is unverifiable. And again, this brings us to this question of facts. Oh, yes, we'll just stick with the facts. Well, in practically in every field of human endeavor, there is a considerable controversy about what constitutes the facts. Piling on, this is from Reuters. Mass formation psychosis is not an academic term recognized in the field of psychology, nor is there evidence of any such phenomenon occurring during the COVID-19 pandemic. Multiple experts in crowd psychology have told Reuters. Online searches for the phrase have spiked this month, as seen in worldwide Google Trends data, after it was used in a popular podcast as the reason why people comply with public health measures. Dr. Robert Malone, previously fact-checked by Reuters here, told the Joe Rogan Experience that mass formation psychosis is a phenomenon that occurred in 1920s and 30s Germany when a highly educated population went barking mad. And that is what's happened here, Malone said. As of January 3rd, the term has gathered more than 100,000 interactions, likes, comments, and shares on public Facebook pages, groups, and verified profiles, according to social media monitoring tool CrowdTangle. Users on Twitter have also shared the term, applying it as if it were a legitimate condition to describe those receiving COVID-19 vaccines, tests, and following other health measures. Legitimate condition, you say. Like ADHD? The definition of ADHD is so broad that practically any normal young man can be diagnosed with it, as well as a lot of young women, as well as a lot of adult men and women. And of course, treatment for ADHD has become big business for big pharma, which of course has nothing to do with the fact that this preposterous classification of ADHD is accepted by the experts. I see that Reuters attaches a tweet from Being Libertarian. Mass formation psychosis is a real pandemic, and you have a bunch of people being double jabbed, wearing masks. They all look identical, flat art. I am fully vaccinated and boosted and just tested positive for COVID-19. I am grateful for the protection my vaccines continue to provide. End communication. The Bradford File tweeted, I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure healthy people spending hours in line to get a virus test is mass formation psychosis in action. Numerous psychologists have also told Reuters that such a condition is not officially recognized. Oh, it's not officially recognized. Okay. Once again, the whole of psychology is based on an idea which cannot be a claim that cannot be proved. Jay Van Bavel, associate professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University, said the term doesn't exist as a real academic concept, adding, I've been studying group identity and collective behavior for nearly 2 decades and just published a book on the topic. And not once have I come across this term. So if someone comes up with a hypothesis, which is not in books, it clearly cannot be true. Now, Dr. Van Bavel, who has just in the last day taken his Twitter account private, he believes in a concept called systemic racism, which besides having no efficacy at all, there is no proof for the existence of such a condition as systemic racism. But that doesn't stop Dr. Van Bavel from believing it and using it as a kosh to bash his enemies over the head with. Tyler Durden writes in Zero Hedge, and this is from Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse. Well, butter my buns and call me a biscuit if this ain't the biggest revealing tell in years. Apparently, big tech and big propaganda media, Reuters and the Associated Press, have joined together to refute the concept of mass formation psychosis and push their collective narrative into the narrative engineering system. The Associated Press and Reuters quickly rushed to the fact check typeset to stop people from recognizing what is most likely the cause of their own psychosis. In a world where things are no longer shocking, this is, well, a little shocking in a weird and seemingly Orwellian kind of way. Yes, Alice, the same experts and media who are credibly accused of enabling the mass formation psychosis would like to assure us that no such thing exists. This is almost too funny. Once a collective group creates an alternative reality of itself, in this case a totalitarian reality, based on government needing to create an irrational illusion of fear that becomes part of the accepted national identity, how can anyone call attention to the outcomes without finding themselves in front of the board of inquisition who organizes the collective? Put another way, if the pod under your bed malfunctioned, but the pods under all the other beds in the city worked, what happens when you awaken and realize that you are not one of them, but you must engage in the world of them while looking for others like yourself whose pods hopefully malfunction? That is the current challenge for anyone trying to communicate on contrary evidence and yet avoid the ire from the collective board of COVID compliance who have successfully brainwashed the audience. As a rather prescient Lewis Carroll shared so brilliantly in his novel Alice Through the Looking Glass, if I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is because everything would be what it isn't. And contrariwise, what is, it wouldn't be. And what it wouldn't be, it would. You see? Let's see if there's anyone in the chat. Hello to Dawn from Beyond, Dan, William Hicks, Jogakin 666, Professor Paul, Kakva Prashavaitia, Jogakin 666, Popcasso 88, Mr. Chuck the Buck Norris. Can't buy alcohol in Quebec without Vax. Ontario rumored to follow soon. I heard liquor stores or government liquor stores, but there must be other places to buy alcohol in Quebec besides government liquor stores. John S. says, KMG working Monday again? Yes, I know. It's a marvel. William Hicks says the full Malone interview is on BitChute and probably Odyssey also. Dr. Deadname says it's just another lockdown Monday. John S. says the hive mind furiously denies the existence of itself. Hello to Anrun. A logic Ouroboros, says Chogokin 666. Yes, quite true. David Wright says Rupert Sheldrake talks much about the mind brain. Where does it reside or emanate from? Interesting scientist who questions established science. Dr. Deadname says, I'll bet mass formation psychosis would exist if it served their purposes, especially to discredit political enemies. Well, I'm just wondering how many psychological terms have been used by prominent psychologists and psychiatrists to defame anyone who voted for Donald Trump. Quite a few, I suppose. No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania says, Rupert Sheldrake inspired 999, which was a great name. Don't know how on point he is, but thanks for being indirectly part of that game. William Hicks says, should the individuals currently living in modern society be considered highly educated, given how easily they've been fooled? Hello to Dionysus. No Sleep says, you must become Magary or you must become Vacary, depending on party line. Star Rover, hello, says Novak Djokovic is the first athlete since Muhammad Ali refused military induction in 1969 to transcend athletics and become a world figure. No Sleep says he really is our Ali. Mr. Chuck the Buck Norris says, according to Vox Day, Germany scrapped its mandatory vax mandate. Jokin666 says, is he still being detained? I'll have more on this later, but no. Last I saw, the Australian government is still trying to kick him out of the country. Hello to Bussin Michael Grace. And here's a funny story. Let's hear from an expert who admits, who revels in his panic. This is from Nanette Asimov at the San Francisco Chronicle. The retweets, likes, and comments lit up for hours Saturday after a well-known San Francisco COVID expert posted an extraordinary story on Twitter. I've been tweeting about COVID for nearly 2 years, wrote Dr. Bob Wachter, UCSF's chief of medicine, but this week it became personal when my 28-year-old younger son got it. What followed in 25 tweets revealed a kind of wrestling match within Wachter, an internal contest between the data-savvy physician who knew that a young triple-vaccinated person would probably weather COVID just fine, and as of Sunday, that appeared to be the case, and the loving father who felt the pandemic's pain up close, perhaps for the first time. With his son's permission, Wachter described his son as generally healthy but overweight, which put him at moderately high risk for COVID. Wachter said his son works in customer service in downtown San Francisco. He is careful. He masks up. And when Omicron hit in December and his father urged him to ditch his two-ply cloth mask for the more conservative KN95, he listened. I'm worried that he'd get it from work or from the bus, Wachter wrote, but that's not how it happened. A friend, also fully vaccinated, joined his son Monday night to watch a movie. On Wednesday morning, he woke up and felt awful. His son's throat felt sore, his cough was dry, and his muscles ached. He had the chills. I told him to stay home, drink fluids, and take Tylenol or Advil, Wachter tweeted. The doctor has been at the forefront of the COVID pandemic since the coronavirus emerged in the U.S. in early 2020. He has emerged as a leader in public education about the disease, its treatment, its prevention. An internal medicine expert, Wachter was lauded in 2015 as the most influential physician executive in the United States by Modern Healthcare magazine. Physician executive, eh? Yet even he had trouble getting his son a COVID test. Local pharmacies were all out of rapid tests, but I had one set stashed away. He masked up with a gold standard N95, met his son outdoors, and poked a swab up his nose. His son tested negative. The doctor said he felt a little reassured at the negative result, but wondered if it could be one of the false negatives he'd heard about with rapid tests. How about the false positives with rapid tests? Still feeling sick, his son was also dubious, so he called the UCSF COVID hotline to see about getting a PCR test, but learned that no appointment was available for 4 days. Wachter turned to chicken soup. But being Wachter, he also tested his son's oxygen, good, and heart rate, concerning, at 120 beats per minute. He called his son the next morning, Thursday at 9 a.m. No answer. That's when the physician dad, who had instructed his son to call if his oxygen level dropped below 95%, gave way to the dad. Yes, this is an actual story in the San Francisco Chronicle. My brain knows the odds of a fully vaxxed young person dying are near zero, he wrote, but the battle within had already begun. Evidence-based medicine meets parental emotion. Yeah, hysterical emotion. He tried his son again at 10 a.m. and getting no answer, went to his son's place and let him in. There he found his son, sleeping and breathing. That morning, his son's friend tested positive, seeming to clinch the diagnosis for his son, but another test was in order. This time, Wachter looked at reports and suggested it may not be enough to just swab your nose. He wrote, swabbing the throat plus nose works better. Swabbing the throat? That's what we did. A good rub around his tonsils and tongues, and then same swab, a bit gross, both nostrils. Is this recommended? A good rub around the tonsils? Isn't this going to exercise the gag reflex? I wonder how many people have been vomited on doing this. Ooh, 50 minutes later, the dreaded pink line appeared. This is a man. His son sleeps in. Oh my God, he could be dead. Although Wachter knew that his son was likely to recover just fine, that's when it's your kid, you freak out a bit. In the end, after investigating his son's prognosis, examining a risk calculator, considering treatments, and talking with his son's doctor, physician dad again gave way to dad, and he let it go. Coming to the end of his tale, he tweeted, "Any lessons?" The professor answered his own question first. Thank God for vaccines. Yes, he had COVID, but his vax slashed the odds of a severe case, hospitalization, and death. Lesson number 2, false negative rapid tests in Omicron are real, as are shortages of tests and meds. And then the lesson from Omicron itself, lower your guard, it'll pounce, he wrote, noting that the illness and the anxiety are miserable. Does anyone remember influenza. Huh? Does anyone remember influenza? Because I've had the flu several times. And I recall I was tweeting about this over the weekend, and I got it wrong on Friday for a reason that you could guess. That in 1977, when I was a healthy 22-year-old, I got the flu, and it knocked me sideways for a week. That's I could use nastier words to describe it. Let's see, sweating like a horse, fever, also almost hallucinogenic, in and out of consciousness for several days. I remember I was reading a book a novel by Stephen Millhauser called Portrait of a Romantic, which seemed, given my heightened state, it seemed quite appropriate. By the way, do you know that footage of Anthony Fauci saying that you could get AIDS by being close to someone with AIDS? Do you know that has come to light? Yeah, you get AIDS from casual contact with people from AIDS. This is America's science supremo. Well, Breitbart is in the fact-checking game as well. Joel Pollack reports U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, we have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, many on ventilators from coronavirus. Verdict false. There are about 4,000 children in hospital from coronavirus. Greg Price tweeted, Justice Sotomayor during the oral arguments claimed COVID deaths are an all-time high, claimed that Omicron has been deadlier than Delta, claimed 100,000 children are hospitalized with COVID, said OSHA's regulatory authority is a federal police power. How stupid is Sonia Sotomayor? Because I discovered some years ago, I guess around the time that she had been appointed, that it would, and strenuous efforts have been made to scrub this information. It would appear that when she entered Princeton University, she was functionally illiterate. And this is from Jim Antle at the Washington Examiner. The White House twice declined to weigh in on the COVID-19 misinformation from liberal justices of the Supreme Court in oral arguments over the administration's vaccine mandate. Misinformation about the virus has repeatedly been called out from the podium in the White House briefing room, with politicians, media figures, and social media platforms all facing criticism for spreading erroneous claims. White House Press Secretary not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, was asked if she would extend this critique to Justice Sonia Sotomayor and other jurists. Well, I'm not going to speak to the Supreme Court arguments, Psaki replied, when asked about Sotomayor's comment that 100,000 children are in serious condition due to the coronavirus. A second reporter asked Psaki whether she was concerned that Sotomayor's comment that the Omicron variant is as deadly as earlier strains, suggesting that misinformation had spread to the Supreme Court, noting the Surgeon General had warned from the briefing room that faulty information is a public health danger. I'm just not going to weigh in on a specific legal argument that's made in the court, Psaki responded. No, of course not. Oh, I see we're getting some embarrassing admissions from the experts. Now, I'm sure that you have heard this from people. This is from The Hill, Carolyn Vackhill. COVID-19 vaccination may cause a temporary change to a person's menstrual cycle, No, a woman's menstrual cycle. But it appears to be a small change, according to a study published Thursday. The study in the Obstetrics and Gynecology journal examined close to 4,000 people, vaccinated and unvaccinated, and examined menstruation data that individuals entered through an app called Natural Cycles. Researchers then examined the difference between menstruation data before and after individuals received their vaccine doses. For individuals who did not receive the vaccine, researchers looked at 6 consecutive menstruation cycles. The researchers found that in vaccinated individuals, bleeding was prolonged by a time that amounted to less than 1 day. However, they concluded that this slight change, while statistically significant, was not clinically significant? No. But Richard Fetisi, the conservative activist, says, I didn't get mine, her period, for 3 months after I was vaccinated. The doctors told me I was in menopause at age 42 based on my levels. The nurses whispered, oh, everyone's periods are getting messed up. When I mentioned this, I was told I was a conspiracy theorist. I'm currently pregnant. Ruth Marcus, of course, of the Washington Post, she gripped the real story about the Supreme Court hearings. Stewing, she tweeted, why wasn't Justice Gorsuch wearing a mask? Other justices were. Reporters are required to, along with attorneys when they're not arguing. Is that why Justice Sotomayor participated remotely? We all owe one another a duty of care and respect, even justices. I responded to her, suggesting that she demand to speak to the manager. I don't know whether she took me up on that. Yes, and this is from Andrew White at the National File. 3 vaccine injections failed to prevent a lawyer arguing against Joe Biden's OSHA vaccine mandate in the Supreme Court from being infected with COVID-19. 2 lawyers arguing against Joe Biden's OSHA vaccine mandate in the Supreme Court have tested positive for COVID-19. 3 injections were unable to prevent Ohio Solicitor General Benjamin Flowers from catching the virus. As a result, he will now have to make his case to the Supreme Court virtually. Flowers was reportedly dealing with exceptionally mild symptoms and has recovered. Louisiana Solicitor General Liz Murrill, whose vaccination status is not known, will make her case over the phone. Everyone's getting it. Everyone's getting it. Oh, and the CDC is pivoting madly now because the supposed death toll from COVID-19 is close to reaching 1 million. And of course, Joe Biden has been president for a year now. And he was going to, tell the virus what's what and put it in its place. And somehow that hasn't happened. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, quote, the overwhelming number of deaths, over 75%, occurred in people who had at least 4 comorbidities. So really, these are people who were unwell to begin with. Oh, I see. Do you remember all those stories of morbidly obese people, saying, I blame the unvaccinated for this, or some person 100, 150 pounds overweight dying, and vaccinated people kill her. Oh, another famous person, Savannah Guthrie of NBC. She's triple vaxxed. Guess who's got COVID as well? She told Rochelle Walensky that her mixed messages has led to a meme on social media poking fun at the CDC's advice. Is there a larger credibility problem with your agency right now? Yes, a CNN story. Healthy 40-year-old COVID victim's last words, I blame the unvaccinated for this. Sheila Johnson, the day before succumbing to COVID. Yeah. Sheila Johnson lived the way any healthy American would, waking up at 6 a.m. to eat a dozen eggs, 36 pancakes, 40 sausages, and washing it down with a gallon of maple syrup. Yeah. Many such cases. Being obese, particularly morbidly obese, is the worst thing that one can do health-wise. But I don't see the government's campaigning against that. This is from BBC Sport. Novak Djokovic said he is focused on playing in the Australian Open next week after winning a court battle that overturned his visa cancellation. The 34-year-old Serb said he practiced on court in Melbourne within hours of leaving an immigration detention hotel. But Australia's immigration minister still has powers to recancel the visa and deport the unvaccinated player. Despite all that has happened, I want to stay and try to compete in the Australian Open, Djokovic tweeted. I remained focused on that. I flew here to play at one of the most important events we have in front of the amazing fans. And this is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Authorities in Australia could still decide to deport Novak Djokovic despite him winning his appeal, while the tennis star's family accuses police of planning to lock him up. The entire farce, which began last week when border officials refused Djokovic entry to compete in the Australian Open despite him having a valid vaccine exemption, is still ongoing. Last night, it appeared as though Djokovic had won the battle when Judge Anthony Kelly ruled that the world's number one could remain in the country to defend his title and that border guards had been unreasonable and not allowed Djokovic enough time to plan an appeal. Yes, at 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, come on, we want evidence from you at 4 o'clock in the morning. However, Immigration Minister Alex Hawke is insisting that he has a personal veto on the issue and could still decide to rip up Djokovic's visa and put him on the next plane home. Djokovic is, of course, a Serb, and he is also an Orthodox Christian. And Western countries do not like Serbs, and they do not like Orthodox Christians. Not one little bit. And so that's one of the reasons why it's, let's dogpile on this tennis player, because he seems dangerous. And news from Ireland. This is from Jennifer Bray at the Irish Times. The state's public health team is set to consider mandatory vaccination, with a new paper being prepared by the Department of Health on the legal and ethical aspects of such a move. It has also emerged that some members of the National Public Health Emergency Team did not agree with proposals for earlier closing times and hospitality introduced last month. And in the United States, this is from Alex Gangitano and Morgan Chalfant at The Hill. Federal government agencies are preparing to take increasingly harsh steps against unvaccinated employees in order to implement President Biden's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal workers. Some agencies plan to send letters warning of possible suspensions to employees who have not complied with the mandate. Many are also prepared to fire employees who don't follow the rule, though such moves would be further down the road. The rate of compliance is high across the federal government, and agencies say they do not expect the suspensions or firings to cause disruptions. Well, why would that be? Because they have many, many, many more employees than they need? That would be my guess. As previously mentioned, and this is from November. I didn't notice it at the time. This is from Isaac Shore at National Review. An old video circulating on social media shows Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, warning that even just close contact with all those already afflicted with AIDS could result in infection. In the context of a conversation about childhood infections, Fauci speculates that, quote, if the close contact of a child is a household contact, perhaps there will be a certain number of cases of individuals who are just living with and in close contact with someone with AIDS or at risk of AIDS, who does not necessarily have to have intimate sexual contact or share a needle, but just the ordinary close contact that one sees in normal interpersonal relations. Yes. We see that Anthony Fauci's main job has been to foment panic in America for decades. Chasten Buttigieg, who is the husband of Pete Buttigieg, who is rumored to be a man born a woman, although I'm not convinced. He had tweeted, AIDS patients died because people feared simply touching them would lead to infection. Families abandoned their own children to be buried in unmarked graves. Let us know where we can send these books, Dennis. God forbid you read one. Kennedy Roberts responded, where did they get an idea like that? And there is attached a clip from ABC News with Anthony Fauci peddling dangerous nonsense. Oh, you know who else who has COVID-19? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is from justthenews.com. Representative AOC tested positive for COVID-19 shortly after being spotted vacationing maskless in Miami. Yes, having a great time with thousands of drag queens, because that's what a normal woman does. She's experiencing symptoms and recovering at home. The Congresswoman received her booster shot this fall and encourages everyone to get their booster and follow all CDC guidance her office stated in a press release Sunday evening. It's unclear how severe her symptoms may be. AOC was spotted shortly before New Year's Eve in Miami with her boyfriend. She has criticized the mandate-free state of Florida in the past for being too lenient about measures regarding COVID-19. Oh, I mentioned, yes, Savannah Guthrie, the lovely Savannah Guthrie of NBC News. After a 50th birthday party, but let's see, is Hoda Khattab? I hope she's all right. And let's go to Ontario, Canada's most populous province. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. Ontario reports at least 2,467 patients in hospital with COVID-19, including 438 in ICU. And let's see, there are 61 children between the ages of 0 and 4 who are now in hospital with COVID-19, up from 51 on January 6th. This age cohort is the highest hospitalization rate of any age group under 60 in the province. I wonder how many of these 61 children were infected in the hospital, because we know that at least half of these people in COVID in the hospital, they were admitted for reasons other than COVID-19. Ontario also recorded another 9,706 cases of coronavirus today, but the true number of cases in Ontario today is likely significantly higher due to restrictions on testing. Of the new cases confirmed today, 263 involved those who are partially vaccinated, 347 involved those with an unknown vaccination status, 1,307 involve unvaccinated individuals, 7,789 involve people who are fully immunized. But make sure you get both jabs and the booster, because it's just so efficacious. Andrew Coyne, who is now with the Globe and Mail, I suppose he's the epitome of Canadian midwit wisdom. A column 2 days ago, the dance of the do we have tos, no matter how artfully we try to avoid it, the reality of COVID is inescapable. Is anyone denying that? Is anyone denying that? Much has been written about the impact on public opinion, particularly as it pertains to the COVID pandemic, of misinformation, false or distorted data disseminated through social media. Boo! Social media is exaggerated to show the pandemic, or that measures against it are ineffective or harmful, or that other alternative measures would be more effective. Rather less has been written about another event that's had an equally profound impact on public opinion: misinterpretation. Disinformation relies on a network of true believers. Oh, true believers. And the Canadian media has no true believers in it. And conspiracy theorists developed by unknown bots of dubious origin. Really? So if you disagree with Andrew Coyne and all the other non-player characters in the Canadian media, you are a bot of dubious origin. Misinterpretation simply relies on the universal human inclination to believe the thing most comfortable to believe, to confirm our prior beliefs, to seek out the easier. You mean that the government has all the answers and is always acting in our best interest, Andrew? The sudden surge in the pandemic, nearly 2 years after it began, due to the emergence of the highly permeable Omicron variant, has made for a misinterpreted boom. It's too easy to think we endured all these lockdowns, vaccinated almost everyone, and the disease is getting worse than ever, and then to think they may not have worked, and then to confiscate the data confirming this suspicion. Why? Just look at the number of people infected who are fully vaccinated. But like all vaccines, it was never the case with the COVID vaccine. Coyne avers that it was 100% effective, only that it is highly effective, has been proven. Before Omicron, double dose of vaccine lowers your chance of getting infected by more than 80%, your chance of being hospitalized more than 95%, your chance of dying over 99%. None of these numbers are all superannuated now. And they frequently result from, we're just going to stop counting people, let's say, after November. Just a reminder, conspiracy theories. How about the conspiracy theory that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, up to and including nuclear weapons, and the capability to deploy them against his enemies, or if he didn't have them, he would soon have them. Andrew Coyne pushed this notion harder than anyone in Canada, one of the voices leading to an invasion of that country, which led to the deaths of many thousands of Allied soldiers, and also to the deaths of how many? Half a million, a million Iraqis. But we bombed them because we love them. Andrew Coyne wrote in the National Post in March 2003, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilian deaths. There is no basis to these forecasts. No one can say with certainty how many will die on either side. But the choice is not between war with all its costs and peace. It is between war now and war later, or a nuclear-armed Saddam, which is the worst outcome of all. Andrew Coyne was, to use a word that Macron is fond of, he was pissed that Canada did not take part in this idiotic war, idiotic criminal war. How would you like to, what sort of person considers himself to be collateral damage and is pleased with it? Well, Adam Goodman is one such person, and he writes at the Globe and Mail, I was hospitalized because of a vaccine side effect, but that didn't stop me from getting a booster. He's a lawyer in Toronto. A common refrain heard from the vaccine hesitant is that because COVID-19 vaccines are so new, we don't know yet if there are negative effects. This belief is false. We do know the negative effects of the vaccines. I am living those effects. After receiving my second dose of Pfizer, I developed what I thought was muscle pain that started in my neck and spread to my chest. After consulting with my personal doctor, I learned that I developed one of the two potential significant side effects associated with the mRNA vaccines, pericarditis, and inflammation of the lining that surrounds the heart. The other side effect, myocarditis, is an inflammation of the heart itself. Other typical side effects associated with viral vector vaccines include syndromes causing blood clots. Because I thought I was experiencing muscle pain, I let the pericarditis go too long without treatment. As a result, I experienced a dangerous squeezing of the heart called tamponade. I spent 5 days in hospital recovering with the help of a crack team of cardiologists, nurses, and pharmacists at Toronto's University Health Network, and a heavy dose of anti-inflammatory drugs. Health Canada reports that there have been 7,126 serious adverse events following vaccination for COVID-19 and 25,388 non-serious adverse events, a tiny number considering that more than 68 million shots have been given. So that's 32,000, about 32,500. The number of adverse events reported in the United States under the VAERS system, which of course is voluntary, has now passed 1 million. How do we get such a disparity between Canada and the United States in this regard? I accept my role as collateral damage of the vaccine rollout, he boasts. For the current Omicron wave, vaccines help get us back to some degree of normality. They protect society and our public health system. Now, the public health system exists to protect us, not the other way around. Previous generations were asked to undertake far greater risks for the protection of society, including being drafted for war. The vaccines are our civic duty. Oh, it's a war now, is it? It's an interesting piece from Keenan Bext at thecountersignal.com. Approximately 89% of unvaccinated residents in Lacrete, Alberta, likely have acquired natural COVID-19 antibodies. However, experts are already coming up with excuses to wave away their natural herd immunity. The 89% figure comes from over 1,200 Lacrete residents who willingly paid $100 out of their own pockets to have their blood tested by Ecor, a private blood testing company. The results are stunning. The pandemic is over in Lacrete. They have reached herd immunity, CEO Mike Kuzmikis told the CBC. As Lacrete has a population of 3,500 with approximately 8,000 in the surrounding area, this sample may not be comprehensive. Still, it, at the very least, should justify further testing to see how common natural immunity is in the rest of the unvaccinated population, not only in Lacrete, but municipalities across Canada. Kuzmikis elaborated, explaining, quote, we had 89% of the unvaccinated population up there test positive for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein antibody, which would indicate that they've seen the virus, they've developed some level of cellular immunity, and they're kind of good to go. They've developed underlying T-cell memory, and they don't have to worry about it, unquote. Surely everyone can rejoice if natural immunity is not only possible but probable and widespread. Then the virus can be left to take its course, and we don't need vaccine mandates, curfews, lockdowns, etc. Unfortunately, experts aren't going to let that happen and have dismissed the evidence that the pandemic is over in La Crete, where mRNA shots have violated less than 40% of the population. Now, Mayo Clinic spokesperson Suzanne Ferguson claims that, quote, there is no official immunity threshold that has been established or officially endorsed to indicate that an individual is immune to reinfection or disease, unquote. Moreover, the CBC is claiming that the evidence coming out of La Crete could lull residents into a false sense of security, says an infectious disease expert. In other words, there's no exit strategy and no threshold which can be passed through which pandemic measures can be removed. And speaking of panic porn, I don't know. I get the impression that Canada is really determined, if only to spite the United States, as if that were possible, to keep the panic porn going for as long as possible on the principle that we're responsible and you're not. I bet you wish you were Canadian. Let's see. CP24 had tweeted Peel Memorial closes urgent care center amid extreme capacity and staffing pressures. Bruce Arthur, former jock sniffer who is now a COVID correspondent for the Toronto Star, tweeted, I still can't believe people are dumb or dishonest enough to think this is Delta. Andrew Coyne, if we had suffered the same number of deaths proportionally as the US, we wouldn't just be mourning the deaths of 20 to 30,000 Canadians from COVID. We'd be looking at somewhere between 120 and 180,000. When people say, why can't we open up like the US? There's your reason. Well, you know, Rachel Walensky might beg to differ, because the CDC is now admitting, oh, yeah, remember when we were telling you that anyone who had COVID, or sometimes they hadn't even been tested for it, but no, that person had COVID, that dead person had COVID, they're going to pull them out. They're not going to consider them the same anymore. Now, I could point out that the American population is considerably fatter than the Canadian population, so that, you know, has something to do with it. But no, we don't want to look at things like that. Andrew Coyne is all in. Oh, did people die with bombs falling on their houses or of them? A lot of those who died in the Blitz had comorbidities or were old. This is insanity. This is mass formation psychosis. Let's talk about the Blitz as if that has anything to do with what is happening now. Someone called A.R. Moxon, okay, he's the author of The Revisionaries. Yes, the boat hit the iceberg, but putting the children in lifeboats is the most destructive thing imaginable to their psyche. It's time for us to stop all this evacuation talk and just complete the voyage. What a card. Yes, the first 7 watertight compartments are now flooded with frigid North Sea water. North Sea? Really? Really? The North Sea? But it's time for us to stop being ruled by our fears and get back to our normally scheduled travel. We must open the shuffleboard courts on the Lido deck. Look at the children's faces when they're in lifeboats. They're frightened. They're confused. They don't want to be there. Their parents don't want them there. We need to put them back on the boat, whose deck is now pitched at 90 degrees. It's time to declare this sinking over. And this snark continues for many more tweets. The rupture of the Titanic by an iceberg in the North Atlantic was a catastrophic event. Every person on board, young or old, faced death. This is not at all what is going on with COVID-19, and anyone like Andrew Coyne, who applauds this, retweets it, wherever, should be deeply ashamed. Oh, some humor here amidst all the panic. Manitoba cabinet minister mocked for tweet of wife shoveling snow after a 12-hour hospital shift. Thousands have retweeted and replied to posts suggesting he's insensitive. John Reyes, the Minister of Economic Development and Jobs, posted the photo taken from inside his home with the caption, "Even after a 12-hour night shift at the hospital last night, my wife still has the energy to shovel the driveway. God bless her and all our frontliners. Time to make her some breakfast." Since the tweet was posted Saturday, Reyes is trending on Twitter, and thousands have retweeted and replied to his post, condemning him for being insensitive. Meanwhile, TMZ, a Los Angeles-based tabloid, picked up the story and poked fun at the fact that Reyes had been tweeting about tennis the night before in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. In a statement issued through his press secretary Sunday, Reyes declined an interview but expressed love and appreciation for his wife, Cynthia. "My wife is amazing, both at home and at work. I'm eternally grateful for her and everything she does. I love her very much. I'm happy that she's getting the worldwide recognition she deserves, and it serves as a reminder to everyone, especially me today, that we can never do enough to show our gratitude to healthcare workers." Well, how about getting off your ass and shoveling the snow like a man instead of waiting for your wife to come back from a 12-hour shift? Other politicians were embarrassed. Thomas Lukashek from Alberta said, "Ladies, let the record show this is not a depiction of every politician husband." I could have done with that coat. Declan Schroeder tweeted, "Once more, just for kicks." And there's the Drake meme, the shoveling the driveway for your healthcare worker wife and then staying up all night watching tennis and tweeting. And this is from Hannah Blow at Breitbart. Nearly half of hospitalized coronavirus patients in New York were admitted for issues other than the virus itself, data released Friday revealed. According to reports, 43% of the estimated 11,500 coronavirus positive hospitalizations in the state were admitted for reasons other than the Chinese coronavirus itself. That number is even higher in New York City, which reported that over half, 51% of hospitalized coronavirus patients were classified as with COVID as opposed to hospitalized for the virus, according to the Daily Mail. And this is from the Daily Mail as well. It is from Professor Angus Dalgleish. The policy of obsessive COVID screening of the population using lateral flow tests has lurched into mass hysteria. Worse, it is tantamount to national self-harm. Hospitals, transport networks, our postal and rubbish collection services, and hundreds of thousands of British businesses are now being crippled because of a mania over checking people for an infection that they may have no symptoms for. With 1 million people in isolation last week, everyday life and the economy is at risk of grinding to a halt. And even more worrying, crucial life-saving work is being jeopardized with more than 40,000 NHS staff unable to attend work for at least 2 days last week. At least 10% of staff at many hospitals were on sick leave or in self-isolation in London hospitals. Some 200 military personnel, including 40 doctors from the armed forces, had to be deployed to ensure wards could be kept open. As the director of the Royal College of Nursing, Patricia Marquis, has said, the situation is simply not safe. Professor Dalgleish is an oncologist at a London teaching hospital. And yeah, let's go back to the chat here and see what we have there. Okay, here we go. Maybe Benedict Arnold just had the coronavirus, says Oscar Toe. William Hicks says if only the captain had enough horse paste, they might have been able to repair the damage to the ship. Dr. Dead Dame, the car just stalled. Okay, honey, get out and start pushing. Maybe the virus sank the Titanic too, says Dr. Dead Name. Moral Outrage Prophet, hello, says the intellectual dark angel has confirmed the findings. Oscar Toe says, actually, Kevin, mass formation psychosis is not real. This has been fact-checked by the experts. Yes, and Seraphim Goose alerts us to the existence of a well-known book, which has been, quoted at length for close to 2 centuries, Charles Mackay's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Polygon says Canada is Tumblr the country. Yeah, I haven't heard that one for a while. I wouldn't be surprised to see them counting bombing deaths as COVID at this point, says Dr. Deadname. William Hicks says, civic duty, you can't make a contribution to society if you're dead or crippled by the jabs. John S. says, why no? No, I don't wish I was Canadian. Dr. Deadname says, with all this fear, you think there would be more public interest in China's lack of transparency. Dawn from Beyond says, it was sort of hilarious listening to that lady talk to the Supreme Court, trying to explain how the unvaccinated pose a threat to the vaccinated, but aren't they protected by the injection? Gunther says, Albert Bourla just said that 2 of his jabs provide very limited protection, if any. He's the CEO of Moderna. So got to get that booster. John S. says, possibly a lifelong disability, pericarditis or myocarditis, heart transplant needed, or you are possibly dead. Dennis Dale, hello, Dennis, says you just need a little boost, buddy. John S. says, seems like Omicron is a much less dangerous way to acquire immunity than the vax. Hello to Teleologic Jones. People seem to believe the first thing they hear, or perhaps the last thing they hear. Moral Outrage Prophet says, R.I.P. J.J. Cale. I got into these silly arguments on Twitter several times with people accusing him of ripping off, or of Eric Clapton of ripping him off. Oh, I see. Covering his songs is ripping someone off, is it? Recording with someone and touring with them is ripping someone off. And someone said, oh, yeah, credit. You gave him credit. And of course, publishing credit is the coin of the realm in music. I would reckon that Eric Clapton put probably several $1 million in J.J. Cale's pocket. He was close to destitute at the time when Clapton covered the first song of his that he covered, After Midnight, back circa 1970. If anyone needs the horse paste, it is that woman, says David Wright. The Mr. Ed variant is real, says Moral Outrage Prophet. I know a life of crime led me to this sad fate, but still, I blame society. That's from Halper, and that's from a Repo Man. Picasso 88 says AOC has equine COVID. Yes, Carl Sagan insisted that not only does alien life exist, but that of course it is more moral than us. There is no evidence whatsoever that any form of alien life exists. But somehow Carl Sagan was not kicked out of the scientific community for essentially, I don't know, fitting it with a religious view of aliens. Saget was found dead. Report said the cause was unknown, but per the COVID blog, he got boosted last month. He tweeted about getting boosted. Hello to D. Skibba. How dare this healthy world-class athlete dare to not risk his life? Referring to COVID. R.I.P. Bjorn Borg. Is that true? Are all these people actually dying? Gunter says, 2 of my vaxxed co-workers just announced they got Omicron. Dan says, vaccine sunken cost fallacy is reaching dangerous highs. 7-Up is the Uncola, says Chogokin 666. Okay. All right. Does anyone remember laughter, says Chogokin 666? Yes, that's a Robert Plant line that was used in Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. Don't think I've ever laughed harder than when KMG reads rap lyrics, says Bussin Michael Grace. Okay, we have still more on this. Let's go to Steve Kirsch's Substack. 80% of airline pilots aren't going to take the booster. Listen to my interview with airline pilot Latane Campbell to get insight into the current thinking of airline pilots. Has the virus been isolated? Yes. So why aren't we doing experiments on animals to determine the safety and efficacy of the COVID vaccines? Answer, because nobody wants to know the answer. And here's a big question. If the vaccines are safe and effective, then why do they need liability protection? If you're a critical thinker, I bet you've wondered about this. I'm going to reveal that the scientific rationale justifying the liability waiver. Back in the 1980s, there were 4 manufacturers of vaccines. They colluded and basically all agreed to stop making vaccines unless the US government gave them liability protection. So that's how it started. Why not drop the liability protection for all parties involved in the vaccination process starting today? If the vaccines are truly safe and effective as claimed, we could drop the liability protection for the vaccines today, but we don't because everyone knows this is not true. The manufacturers would immediately stop production and everyone would be forced to take early treatment. And we can't have that. If Congress dropped the liability protection for vaccines, do you know what would happen? It would force the drug makers to test their products before injecting into human beings. Fat chance of that ever happening. The vaccine manufacturers have it made. Mandated use of product, no liability. So you make the product, and regardless of the results, you sell more product. I hate to sound cynical, but that's what the data show if you've been reading my Substack. The more boosters you take, the sicker you get. That's what the numbers show. And what are the reasons for that? Let's go to Eugipius and his Substack. Are the vaccines doomed or are we? In a period from December 6th to January 2nd, double but not triple vaccinated teenagers and adults were substantially overrepresented in Omicron infections across Germany. Almost 45% of teenagers aged 12 to 17 are vaccinated but unboosted, but they accounted for almost 55% of symptomatic Omicron cases. Only 37% of adults aged 18 to 59 are vaccinated but unboosted, but they accounted for 66% of symptomatic Omicron cases. Finally, a mere 21.8% of adults aged 60 or over are vaccinated but unboosted, but they accounted for 46% of Omicron cases. Yes, these data might be called unadjusted. You might hope that population density or differences in treatment-seeking behavior or relative risk perception, anything but properties inherent to the vaccines, can explain them away. But Germany is not alone in these numbers. Preliminary evidence for negative vaccine efficacy against Omicron every day grows more abundant. There was also evidence of negative efficacy against Delta. The effect was merely less pronounced and took longer to emerge. Omicron, which has immune escape properties, simply gets further into negative efficacy faster. It seems clear the problem is related to vaccine fade. The older double vaccinated, whose vaccinations happened earliest of all, are experiencing worse negative efficacy than the younger double vaccinated, whose vaccinations are much more recent. Of 797 Omicron cases in children aged 5 to 11, only 2 are in the disgracefully double vaccinated. These are very recent vaccinations indeed. For the moment, the boosted are doing very well against Omicron, but I doubt anyone believes that will last. In all likelihood, the third dose will fade just like the first 2, and then negative efficacy will come back. On balance, this strikes me as a bad thing, Eugipius writes, and urgently requiring investigation. It throws the entire doctrine of maximum vaccination into confusion. Against the advantage of substantial protection against severe outcome must be weighed the substantial disadvantage of indefinitely heightened transmission, which can only be mitigated temporarily by vaccinating the whole population all over again. In a rational world, this phenomenon would be met, at the very least, with a halt in most or all vaccinations, but this is very far from the world we inhabit. Omicron is a much milder variant, it is true. Official sources now widely acknowledge this property, although it is not terrifying, and so not discussed as eagerly as the alleged greater virulence of alpha or beta or delta. Nevertheless, even mild viruses can cause serious disruptions if everyone gets them at once, and the possibility that we may have condemned large segments of our population to suffer repeated reinfection or accept quarterly vaccination is disturbing. For this and other reasons, Eugipius declares, I think the vaccines are doomed and will probably be discredited even in the medium term. My learned friend Astuages, however, disagrees, and it's worth considering his perspective. This fellow says, I am not by nature an optimist about the right side being rewarded in the end. To begin with, the media discussion landscape for vaccination was already poisoned by the autism debate, and the vast majority of people are simply never going to grasp the idea that there's any difference between an mRNA SARS-CoV-2 vaccine and the smallpox vaccine. There are at least 2 counterfactual assumptions that justify vaccine approval for low-risk groups and even mandates. They are important counterfactuals because the FDA, CDC has used them to justify their decisions to date. One, the vaccine is sterilizing. Two, the vaccine provides long-term protection from disease, either total protection from infection or amelioration of symptoms. If either of these are true, then the vaccine can be justified on either public health grounds, get rid of the virus, or personal risk grounds. Counterfactual one, sterilization. Of course, the vaccine is non-sterilizing. In fact, the negative efficacy from Omicron should be causing people to freak out. Vaccine-amplified infection is pandemic sci-fi level bad. Vax-negative efficacy for Omicron means that over the next few years, there is a very high probability of even more vaccine-amplified variants. There is the possibility, how high I can't guess, that some of these will be severe instead of mild. Maybe they'll kill the vaccinated and be a win for anti-vax, but maybe they'll kill the unvaccinated and be a win for pro-vax, even though it's actually the fault of the pro-vax side. It's even possible that Omicron itself could be like this very early days. Counterfactual 2. Long-term protection of the vaccine really protected you forever from COVID. It makes a lot of sense for many groups, even lowish risk groups. It still wouldn't make sense for healthy kids, but it might be the sort of thing that your doctor recommends when you turn 30. But in the real world scenario, where the vaccine does not protect you for very long, it begins to make negative sense from a personal risk standpoint. That is, should someone who is 45 and obese, at small but non-trivial risk of death from COVID, get vaccinated now for X numbers of years of protection? Maybe infinite boosters work out over the next decade and he's okay. Maybe there are no vaccine amplified variants. More likely, things aren't quite that perfect, and he gets COVID when he's 55 and dies because he didn't get the wild type infection that would have granted him more protection when he was younger and safer from it. Basically, even apart from side effects, these vaccines, under what we now know to be true, only make sense for a much smaller, higher risk group of people than initially thought. Unfortunately, there is no process for the FDA, CDC, or the media to revisit those basic counterfactuals. They can stay wrong forever, and Pfizer will be happy to rake in the cash. But what about side effects? The myocarditis side effect is enough to demonstrate that we shouldn't be vaccinating under 40s under the realistic scenario, the one where we already know we shouldn't be vaccinating them, but not enough under the counterfactual scenario FDA, CDC operates under. The problem for anti-vax is that the rate of hospitalization and death remains minuscule. I personally think these myocarditis side effects are legitimately scary in an infinite booster scenario, given how risk jumps on the third shot. But that's just not the scenario that FDA or Pfizer, LOL, is evaluating it by. They're still operating under their two counterfactuals, and they will continue to do so, and they will get plenty of media cover. If anybody thinks the side effects are enough to cause a serious reevaluation of vaccine policy all on their own, there's not nearly enough hospitalization and death yet. I've watched all-cause mortality graphs like a hawk looking for it. There are some minuscule signals, but nothing that can't be easily ignored. For real public attention, we'll need orders of magnitude, at least 2, but possibly 3, more vaccine injuries than we currently got or likely to get. Maybe in 10 years, if there's enough booster uptake and injuries because too much to ignore, but don't bet against the power of willful ignorance, we may see a serious reevaluation of vaccine injury. Back to Eugippius. These are very good reasons to doubt the vaccine side effects, whether at the individual or the population level, can bring the vaccination regime down by themselves. Establishment propaganda has successfully defended these oversold and misused products in the eyes of millions of people. It is, however, hard for me to see how long this can last. To begin with, there is the old point of mine that propaganda is expensive. Setting up and promoting dishonest worldwide messaging campaigns costs a lot of money, energy, and attention. These are resources that can't be spent on other things. The more obvious the lies become, the more expensive it will get to maintain them. I'm not sure how long our governments, our public health establishments, and our pharmaceuticals can remain committed to this project, or how long they'll even stay interested in it. Corona is constantly threatening to become unimportant, and when that happens, who will even care about maintaining this entire rotten morass? If Pfizer's profits are all that matter, the government can just give them money or buy vaccine doses and fire them off into space in case the aliens want them. The vaccines have also benefited over the past year from enormous bureaucratic and public enthusiasm, not all of it seeded from on high. It feels bizarre to type this, but lockdowns enjoyed much of the same dynamic at first. They very quickly burnt through most of their public support as everyone but a few crazy people realized that house arrest wasn't very much fun. In the Northern Hemisphere, they're now consigned to the dustbin and studiously ignored on almost everywhere. Every day that coronavirus does not go away in heavily vaccinated populations is a day that the vaccines are further discredited. Well, one can only hope. Someone mentioned, I think at Vox Day had reported, let's see if I can find that. Color Revolution fail. Scotland Adams and the limits of Boomer. Oh my God, Adams has embarrassed himself. Perhaps almost as much as Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who has just become an utter joke. Oh, Germany delays its vaccine mandate. Germany's plan to impose nationwide compulsory vaccination against COVID-19 likely won't come to fruition anytime soon, not due to lack of will, but because of bureaucratic hurdles, media reports suggest. In November, then designated Chancellor Olaf Scholz told Germany's ZDF broadcaster that he expected a nationwide vaccination mandate to be introduced by February or March. Now, however, the regulation might not be enforced until May or even June, the Tagesspiegel had daily reported. The delay is not a sign that Scholz's government is any less determined to see Germans vaccinated, but is merely due to a series of bureaucratic hurdles. That's a curious way of putting it. And let's go to Alex Berenson and his Substack. Okay. Much more to say about this in the next few days, but the mRNA data are getting more troubling from every angle on an almost daily basis. And very soon, the people who care about and believe in routine childhood vaccinations for measles, etc., are going to have to decide if they want their effort tainted by COVID vaccine failure. I have a feeling they won't. We will see. And China. Oh, China. They're really they really like the Pfizer jab, right? Apparently they don't. Funny story, the Chinese want nothing to do with mRNA COVID vaccines. I wonder why. So the Financial Times had another elite media howler last week. The Chinese are desperate, I say, to get themselves an mRNA vaccine. And it turns out that China has they bought a whole bunch of it, zillions of doses, and they keep buying more and more and more, but they're not using it. They have refused to use it. In November, the Chinese announced that they had supposedly begun trials on their own mRNA vaccine. No one seems to have any idea when those trials will be finished, but they have the effect of resetting the clock and giving the blue check geniuses at places like the Financial Times a way to pretend that the Chinese are moving aggressively ahead with mRNA. Of course, given that COVID has essentially been non-existent in China since February 2020, maybe the scientists in the People's Republic know something the rest of us don't. Nah, that's impossible. They definitely tell us, right? And let's go to Lockdown Skeptics, or now dailyskeptic.org. And vaccinated doctors among 1.2 million to sign petition to French National Assembly protesting vaccine passports as major attack on the rule of law. Imperial finally acknowledges pre-existing immunity to COVID-19. What took it so long? Pressure on health services abating, says Michael Gove, as he refuses to rule out end of free lateral flow tests. Okay, we've already talked about Djokovic. If Omicron is so mild, why are ICU admissions skyrocketing in Australia? What's going on in Australia? ICU admissions have shot up as Omicron has taken hold. As of deaths, bear in mind, 77% of the population are double vaccinated, and it's the middle of summer there. Now, it could be just that there are so many more Omicron infections in the formerly zero COVID country than there were of previous variants, and that despite being mild, their sheer numbers are causing the spike. Indeed, a Delta positivity peaked at 1.3%, whereas Omicron positivity is at 22.5% and rising. With an infection rate up to 20 times higher, the fact that ICU patients are still below the Delta peak suggests it is milder, and there's just a lot of it. 99.9987% of under 20 survive COVID study finds, and 97.1 of the elderly do as well. Early last year, renowned epidemiologist Professor John Ioannidis published an analysis of seroprevalence antibody studies from 2020, which concluded that the infection fatality rate of COVID-19, the proportion of those infected who died, was around 0.15% globally. It varied significantly by region, up to 0.3 to 0.4% in Europe and the Americas, and down to 0.05% in Africa and Asia. Professor Ioannidis has now published an update using additional seroprevalence studies, though still based on 2020 data. He and his colleague found the IFR varied from 0.00113% in the under 20s to 0.65% in those in their 60s. For those above 70 not in a care home, it was 2.9%, rising to 4.9% for all over 70s. This means that even for the elderly, more than 95% of those infected survive, 97.1% when considering those not in a care home. Is the government split on shelving free lateral flow tests? The Sunday Times has splashed that free lateral flow tests could be on the way out, but with Nadhim Zahawi denying it, it's clear there's a split in government over this. Oh, yes. Cumulative excess deaths 2021. This is a little map from The Economist. And we see dark colors, and dark is the worst, and getting lighter and lighter. And the lightest of all in Europe, it's yellow, which just happens to be one of the national colors of Sweden. And Martin Farnell said, what's the name of the country in yellow? I bet they had very strict lockdowns to achieve this outcome. Double vaccinated have double the infection rate, data from Iceland shows. But make sure you get that booster. Make sure that you get that booster. And collateral damage, you should be proud. I mean, that's the bulldog spirit, to be proud to be collateral damage. Jim Kunstler writes this morning, we are at a strange pass in the saga of COVID. It seems the spiky virus wants to leave center stage, is weary of all the attention, wants to fade in the eternal parade of microorganisms that cozily coexist with the human life stream. Like Tony Fauci's HIV, a fellow traveler in the old-time throng of human viruses, now semi-retired, and yet still every bit as mysterious in the actual mechanism of AIDS as it was when Dr. Fauci pinned his NIAID Distinguished Service Medal on its elusive bosom, so to speak. But you'd have to read Bobby Kennedy's book on Fauci to get the drift of that. Omicron is sweeping the country as love once did in George Gershwin's day. We are a different country now, as anyone tuned into Turner Classics movie can discover. Omicron, the 36-hour head cold that COVID-19 has been demoted to. Omicron, a mere wisecracking gecko compared to the roaring dragon that was COVID-19 in the winter of 2020. Omicron, kind of an embarrassment to vaccine tyrants who still seek to jab every arm on earth and at ever-shortening intervals, like a med school version of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, only with syringes running amok instead of brooms. The party of chaos, the one headed by the ectoplasmic Joe Biden, does not want to let go of COVID-19, its Swiss Army knife of destruction. With COVID-19, you can push people around and mess with their lives every which way, shut down their businesses, lock them in their homes, screw them out of their livelihoods, delete their reputations, board up their social venues, cancel their careers, revoke their licenses, drag them into court, fine them into penury, cram them into prison camps, and much more. If COVID-19 actually does make that move to exit the scene, the party of chaos will have to find a new focus for its anxiety-driven lunacy. And if the front page of the New York Times is the party's id, a signifier of intent, then the focus will shift to fomenting war with Russia. Notice today's lead headline, top left above the fold, as we used to say when the darn thing was printed on paper. American and Russian diplomats meet in a bid to avert war in Ukraine. The headline declares, don't know about you, but to me that suggests the USA sees war as a possibility, something we've already gamed into our plans, like it would be something we could handle. Forgive the rather glum reality test, but war with Russia over Ukraine is for sure something that the USA probably cannot handle. The most likely outcome would be a king hell embarrassment on the battlefield, not just because we would be fighting on Russia's doorsill, where sheer logistics favor our adversary with ready resupply and all, but because our pussified military with gal bomber pilots and pregnancy flight suits and other novelties of diversity and inclusion will result in the most ignominious ass-kicking in our history, following a 50-year string of prior embarrassments. The second most likely outcome of this face-off with Russia would be that old familiar nuclear World War III, with everything from Bangor to Pacific Heights turned into one big smoldering ashtray. Underlying this lunacy is the USA's perverse wish to enlist Ukraine in NATO. Ukraine, that mighty economic powerhouse, what Ukraine is a supersized version of Detroit, a hollowed-out shell of a place whose mojo left on the 910 train to Palookaville decades ago, and has been on international life support since the DC deep state ran its 2014 color revolution in the Maidan Square. The Russians object to American hugger-mugger in Ukraine because following the implosion of the Soviet Union, we promised the Russians that no expansion of NATO in the direction of their border. Yes, we did. We said that. But no, wait, Canada to the rescue. This is from Ashley Burke at the CBC. Canada has told the U.S. that it's willing to help with possible deterrence measures against Russia, which could include sanctions to head off a crisis in Ukraine. Canada made the offer during a meeting between Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken December 31st. The source said the message was received well by Blinken. And of course, I'm looking at a picture of, I'll say as always, Jolie in name, Jolie in nature. My word, what a good-looking woman. Not just good-looking for a politician, but genuinely good-looking. And, the aforementioned Melanie Joly is not ruling out the possibility of Canada sending weapons to Ukraine as Russia amasses troops along the eastern border, noting that her cabinet colleagues are working closely on the issue. Well, at least the fatuous suggestion that Canadian troops should be sent to protect what is surely the most corrupt country in the Western world. A country that, despite its agricultural and mineral riches, has a per capita GDP less than half that of Belarus. Yes, Belarus is an economic titan compared to the Ukraine. Glenn Lowry is born 1948, described by Wikipedia as an American economist, academic, and author. He is currently professor of economics and social sciences at Brown University. And this fellow has had a very interesting life, I must say. Amy Wax is, I suppose her life is even more remarkable. Born in 1953, she graduated from Yale University with a Bachelor of Science in Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry, summa cum laude. In 1975, she then attended Oxford, where she was a Marshall Scholar in Philosophy, Physiology, and Psychology at Somerville College. She next attended both Harvard Medical School, MD 1981, and Harvard Law School, first year of law school, 1981. She practiced medicine from 1982 to 1987, doing a residency in neurology at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center, and working as a consulting neurologist at a clinic in the Bronx and for a medical group in Brooklyn. She completed her legal education at Columbia Law School, JD 1987, editor of the Columbia Law Review, working part-time to put herself through law school. She clerked for Judge Abner Mikva of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit and was admitted to the New York State Bar in 1988. She worked in the Office of the Solicitor General at the U.S. Department of Justice from 1988 to 1994. She argued 15 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. She taught at the University of Virginia Law School from 1994 to 2000. And she is the Robert Mundheim Professor of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, having joined the faculty in 2001. Yes, she is a brave, besides being a very clever woman, she is a brave woman as well. And that's a dangerous thing in America today. Well, of course, not just America, everywhere in the West. She has this disturbing habit of noticing things. For instance, well, she and Larry Alexander 5 years ago published a piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer titled "Paying the Price for Breakdown of the Country's Bourgeois Culture," and it's illustrated with a picture of John Wayne in The Searchers. It doesn't really strike me as much of a bourgeois figure, but he was fighting for it. Too few Americans are qualified for the jobs available. Male working age labor force participation is at Depression era lows. Opioid abuse is widespread. Homicidal violence plagues inner cities. Almost half of all children are born out of wedlock, and even more are raised by single mothers. Many college students lack basic skills, and high school students rank below those from 24 other countries. The causes of these phenomena are multiple and complex, but implicated in these and other maladies is the breakdown of the country's bourgeois culture. That culture laid out the script we were all supposed to follow. Get married before you have children and strive to stay married for their sake. Get the education you need for gainful employment, work hard, and avoid idleness. Go the extra mile for your employer or client. Be a patriot, ready to serve the country. Be neighborly, civic-minded, and charitable. Avoid coarse language in public. Be respectful of authority. Eschew substance abuse and crime. These basic cultural precepts reigned from the late 1940s to the mid 1960s. They could be followed by people of all backgrounds and abilities, especially when backed up by almost universal endorsement. Adherence was a major contributor to the productivity, educational gains, and social coherence of that period. Did everyone abide by those precepts? Of course not. There are always rebels and hypocrites, those who publicly endorse the norms but transgress them. But as the saying goes, hypocrisy is the homage vice pays to virtue. Even the deviants rarely disavowed or openly disparaged the prevailing expectations. Was everything perfect during the period of bourgeois cultural hegemony? Of course not. There was racial discrimination, limited sex roles, and pockets of anti Semitism. However, steady improvements for women and minorities were underway even when bourgeois norms reigned. And it goes on. This article in the Philadelphia Inquirer led to an ongoing effort to have her kicked out of the university. Apparently, this was one of the most shocking and horrifying things that had ever been published in America, certainly by a law school professor. Just a statement on Amy Wax from the Daily Pennsylvanian some years ago, commenting on the Inquirer story. Extolling the virtues of white cultural practices, boo, of the 50s that, if understood within their socio-cultural context, stem from the very same malignant logic of hetero-patriarchal class-based white supremacy that plagues our country today. These cultural values and logics are steeped in anti-blackness and white hetero-patriarchal respectability, i.e., two hetero-parent homes, divorce is a vice, and the denouement of all groups perceived as not acting white enough, i.e., Black Americans, Latino communities, and immigrants in general, and simplistic, bigoted, archaic notion of culture, blah, blah, blah. Well, she's, fighting it out. She is fighting it out. She had a conversation with Professor Lurie on his show, which is you can find on YouTube, and I recommend it. And I have to give credit to Professor Lowry, well, for having this talk, because Professor Wax is now considered to be a non-person. Lowry calls himself a conservative. I don't think that he is. He is I suppose you could call him a classical liberal. He seems to be a very, a good-hearted person who is honest. I wanted to mention something that came up in the constantly comes up in the discussion of Professor Wax, that she has written that it would be best if homosexuals took a step back, from the center of the culture. And I think that is a excellent idea because our sexual mores are now determined by homosexuals, and this has been an absolute disaster for society. It's not just that we are increasingly sex obsessed, but that we have adopted a worm's eye view of the world. And Lurie, well, yeah, he's a good conservative. Okay, this is from Neil Monroe. The U.S. government should import more Asian workers because Americans are mediocre laggards, says Glenn Lowry, a professor at Brown. I think we need these Asian people, Lowry said in a December 20th conversation with Amy Wax. Let them come. I mean, in fact, that's the only way we're going to survive the challenge of the Chinese behemoth going forward another generation or two, because if I look at what's going on in the legacy population, white and black of the United States of America, I see a lot of mediocrity. I see a lot of laggardliness. I see a lot of decay and corruption and so forth, of people not realizing the full human potential. I don't know what the alternative is. Wax responded, Glenn, we've got the whole heartland. We can't just kind of give up on this whole heartland population, okay? This is the population, the descendants of people that built this country, that conceived this country, that thought of the basic compact and the basic paradigm and the fundamental ideas of this country for a couple of centuries. And now you're basically saying they're spent, it's over for them, they've sunk into mediocrity and indifference. Well, I agree those problematic things are happening, but why are they happening? What can we do to revitalize? Can we revitalize this? Let's just say it, this mainly white population. Well, it doesn't help that, as the late Jerry Pournelle used to point out, that America's public schools were deliberately wrecked by the elite. Why would they do that? Well, spite is one reason. Boredom, I suppose, the imp of the perverse, but also because in a system with good public schools, it means that outliers can challenge the elite. When you wreck the public schools, then you get oligarchy, which is what America has now. And the elite likes it that way. Glenn Lowry is admirably honest, cognizant of the terrible conditions that obtain for Black people in the United States. I don't mean as the result of systemic racism, which doesn't exist, but because of the chaos and squalor in Black communities. But he argues in his discussion with Amy Wax that no, white people cannot have identity politics because identity politics are bad. Well, I can look at my own example. That I was a liberal with regard to race relations for all of my life. But this began to change. I guess it was about 1990 when Jesse Jackson and his Rainbow Coalition showed up at Stanford University, and they were chanting, hey, 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 ho, Western Civ has got to go. When Lowry says that white identitarianism has got to go, I say, well, you first. Blacks have allied with other minorities to destroy Western civilization and to make Europeans second-class citizens or worse in the countries where they are indigenous and in the countries they founded. Whites will either fight for their own people or be submerged. Amy Wax said with regard to Asians, we have reason to doubt that the idea of liberty rings in their breasts. Yes, this is absolutely true. They don't care about liberty, they just care about power. That simple. They are not like us. And despite the advantages that they have in North America, they become increasingly anti-white, even ferociously anti-white. Now, a lot of that has, particularly among the men, well, no, not just the men, but the women, there's a sexual aspect to this, which is very powerful. It's rarely acknowledged, but it exists. Look, white people have been put into a defensive situation. Oh no, we all believe in colorblindness. Well, no, you can't believe in colorblindness if your enemy does not believe in color blindness. And our enemies are speaking increasingly in eliminationist language. Ibram Kendi is a perfect example of that. It's gone too late for this. It's gone too far for this. That, as I never tire of pointing out, liberalism is dead. The Enlightenment is over. That experiment has been tried and it has failed. Demography is destiny. Our enemies know it, but we have decided that we're going to pretend that we don't. I could give many such examples, but here's another one. This is from Sam Raskin of the New York Post. Mayor Eric Adams of New York City on Sunday defended choosing his brother to serve as a deputy NYPD commissioner, saying he needs someone he can trust to protect him. Well, protect him from whom? Quote, "Let me be clear on this. My brother is qualified for the position. Number one, he will be in charge of my security, which is extremely important to me at a time when we see an increase in white supremacy and hate crimes." Oh, his security is very important to him. Well, personal security is very important to everyone. So I guess the mayor of New York City, or what do they call him, Mayor Nightclub or something, what he needs a Praetorian Guard, does he? And apparently there is so much white supremacy in New York City that they just elected a black man, and a dark-skinned black man at that, to the position of mayor of New York City. But his resentment knows no bounds. It's a piece from Tom Knighton from bearingarms.com. USA Today hoped they could smear gun rights advocates by linking them to Nazis. It was a tenuous link at best. Frankly, it was one of those things that was designed to infuriate the pro-gun side of the debate and provide ammunition to the gun control crowd. The problem was that the ammunition is so weak, it's pathetic. Regardless, you can't let claims like that fester because someone will believe them. Gun rights groups sure aren't ignoring it. USA Today ran a story alleging that Second Amendment activism can be a gateway to extremist ideologies like the neo-Nazi movement. Boy, it's almost as if they wish Hitler would come back. He's not coming back. Hitler was the biggest loser in world history. He left Germany a smoking ruin, and at the same time managed to lose, 35 to 40% of its territory. Gavin Newsom, the well-coiffed governor of California, according to AP, Adam Beam, backed by soaring revenues amid the pandemic, Newsom Monday proposed a budget that would pay for the health care of all the state's low-income residents living in the country illegally. Yes, of course. Of course. Let's bring more of these people into California, which, it's not really America anymore, is it? Victor Davis Hanson has a good piece at AmericanGreatness.com. What makes riots, conspiracies, cabals, and insurrections good or bad? Shut up and keep quiet. That is all ye need to know for now. If the Republicans take the House or perhaps even the Senate, what new norms will they inherit from the Democratic majority of 2019 to 2021? Will Speaker Kevin McCarthy on national television ritually tear up the text of Joe Biden's State of the Union address and grimace while he speaks? Was that Speaker Pelosi's intended vision of a new narrative for the 21st century Congress? Will a new majority, calling back to 2018, almost immediately begin impeaching an unpopular Biden? And will Republicans likewise dispense with a special counsel's report or with formal hearings with an array of witnesses with spirited cross-examinations? Will they establish a special committee to investigate the rioting of summer 2020, perhaps in the new cannibalistic spirit of the age? Will they dig into which national political figures or colleagues communicated with Antifa or Black Lives Matter riot leaders or offered them bail? Yeah. This is just projection. This is projection from the left. Oh, the right wants to ignite a civil war. No, they have already ignited a civil war, in the belief that, well, they can't lose. They can't lose because they're up against a bunch of yahoos. At the same time, they rail, about Americans and their guns and how many guns Americans have. These dumb yahoos. They actually believe that they could, incite a civil war and win easily. If they spent some time on YouTube, just looking at gun videos, they would find out just how many Americans are really good with guns at hitting targets, often from considerable distances. This was a sad story in the New York Post because it's about a pretty girl who is sad, and I don't like to see pretty girls who are sad. It's about a young woman called Carolyn Cronin. Woman claims Bachelor producers ghosted her because of her body type. This is by Samantha Ibrahim. Not a good fit TikTok user, Carolyn Cronin, claimed that Bachelor producers passed on casting her and never called her back due to her body type. She shared a TikTok video, which has been viewed over 177,000 times since last week, in which she alleged that the show ghosted her because she was a size 6 to 8. It's time to show the world what our world really looks like, Cronin told the Post. Her original video, which has since been removed, it was about being ignored by the ABC dating series in November, is now coming forward with an explanation. The Post has reached out to ABC reps for The Bachelor for comment. I just want to get married, she captioned her clip with a slew of hashtags. When you get a DM from Bachelor casting producers, but you're a size 6 to 8, her video began. She then revealed that producers reached out to her via Instagram last year. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Stuff like this never happens to me. I also thought it was a good thing because I'm not the typical beauty standard for what I think the show normally presents, Cronin claimed. Producers have done a really great job, or however we feel about it, with diversifying the cast of contestants that they bring on every year, but they never really diversify the body type of the people that are on the show. I'm a size 6 to an 8, depending on the brand. So based off of being scouted off Instagram, I thought this wasn't going to be a big deal. I don't lie on my Instagram, and I don't use body filters or face apps. And looking at pictures of her, I see remarkably that she doesn't seem to have any tattoos. According to the Bachelor hopeful, she then messaged the producers back saying she would love to talk to them some more after they initially reached out. They ghosted me just like all the other men in my life. I'm honestly fine with it. It's not something I expected to have happened to me. I'm not heartbroken about it, but I'm kind of disappointed. And they have many pictures in the New York Post story of her, one in a bikini, and this is a quite attractive young woman indeed. A redhead with green eyes, with a fine figure. So this got me thinking. Men are always ghosting her? Why would men always ghost her? Why would a woman who looks like this, with a pretty face too, have trouble finding a husband? Well, she is an actress. And actors, particularly actresses, are known for being histrionic, I suppose we could say. I'm reminded, I suppose the best example that I have seen, at least in recent years, is by a Canadian actress, Sarah Goldberg. She's from Vancouver. And she is in the show Barry. Sally Reed. She's an aspiring actress. And it's just, I mean, you're only seeing her at secondhand, of course. It is exhausting being around her, with this narcissism combined with bottomless self-pity, or flying into a rage. Why did she get that role and not me? I'm 100 times better than her. No, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. Now, Carolyn Cronin, the story doesn't say how old she is. I went to IMDb, and it doesn't mention how old she is. Carolyn Cronin, has her own webpage where you can, links to her Instagram, her resume, various media, etc., etc. And I don't know. I've never seen her act, but she's certainly a fine-looking woman. I don't know. Perhaps it is. She is so TikTok, Instagram, etc., etc. Perhaps she is devoting more time to social media than, I don't know, finding a husband. I mean, it's all very well proving one's superiority over other women on social media. Men are not interested in that. They have no interest in that whatsoever. No, perhaps she's too full of herself. I don't know. Perhaps she's an unpleasant person. But again, I just, there's so many of these stories. Why can't I find a man? And then, you see a picture of these women and yeah, okay, try looking in the mirror. Like, why are you 40 pounds overweight, but dressed like you're not? Why is your body covered in ink? Why do you have all these piercings on your face? And this woman has no piercings. Again, come on, man. Someone snap her up. Pretty girl like that with no piercings and no ink. Let's go back to the chat here. What? I'm really surprised these rattlesnakes in dresses are getting ghosted, says Oscar Toe. Media Hit says NPR is having a great resignation from their POC journalists. What? I really love how they look at me with murderous intent when bagging my groceries. Georgie girl, says Media Hits. That could be part of it. Of course, this woman is a lot better looking than Lynn Redgrave ever was. Don Willis says, I don't see race except for when I'm walking from parking lot, walking to car, shopping at ATMs, deciding where to shop for gas bars and restaurants, strange people in my neighborhood. Oh, wait. Liberalism and democracy had a long run through and produced good things. I'd rather say humanity failed it, says Oscar Toe. True Greenberg says, remember, if they're trying to erase your people from the planet, there's still no excuse for violent opposition to them. British American says there's no capacity for universalism of mind or sentiment among any cultures but the white one. No, this is absolutely true, and this cannot be repeated often enough or strongly enough. I dissent from KMG's appraisal of Mélanie Joly, says Halper. Oh, well. I just think she's really, really good looking. Why she is foreign minister, why I keep seeing whispers that she intends to become the next prime minister of Canada. Well, I don't know. KMG, Media Head says, KMG, you're talking about the overweight chick from The Bachelorette? No, this is a woman who was not chosen to appear. British American has a pretty good explanation. These women obviously are holding out for the highest status men, all of whom are looking for younger women than them. Yeah, I want to hear KMG say I'd hit that. I don't know that. I don't like that expression. No, I look at this woman and I think, yeah, there has to be something. There has to be something wrong there. Again, she wants the billionaire CEO rock star? Is that who she's looking for? Well, look at Amber Heard. She is crazy as a loon, and she managed to get to Johnny Depp and Elon Musk. But you knew that she was crazy. I mean, I don't have any sympathy for Johnny Depp. I mentioned this before. I have no sympathy for Brad Pitt for the same reason. Nobody forced them to marry crazy lesbians. And let's talk about conservatism. Y'all know it. Y'all love it, right? No, I know it well, but I don't love it. I hate it. And people should stop calling themselves that because you're allowing yourselves to be controlled by your enemies. This is from Jack Montgomery at Breitbart. Tory Grande and David Cameron's former right-hand man, George Osborne, has backed the Black Lives Matter radicals who destroyed Edward Colston's statue in Bristol. British jury system again acquits itself brilliantly. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer and Brexit fearmonger said of the so-called Colston Four being found not guilty of criminal damage despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, after the judge instructed jurors to consider whether the statute of the long-dead Christian philanthropist and parliamentarian transfigured into a hate figure over then unremarkable business ties to the slave trade was indecent or abusive. Quote, would have been stupid to convict those who pulled down Colston's statue. Thomas and Oliver Cromwell pulled down many more statues. I suppose it's you could always judge a man by his heroes. Thomas and Oliver Cromwell. First, the former Lord Great Chamberlain of Henry VIII, who helped derive the destruction of swaths of England's architectural and religious heritage during the so-called dissolution of the monasteries. Yes, Protestant thugs went from church to church and destroyed every beautiful thing they could get their hands on. And, oh, yes, Oliver Cromwell. Yeah, why don't we talk about him in Ireland? Why don't we talk about the tens of thousands of Irish who were taken as slaves and sent to the Caribbean? Oh, we're not supposed to call them slaves. They were indentured servants. But if you are taken to a place with a wage so low that you can never buy back your freedom, that means slavery to me. Conditions were absolutely horrific. And, well, it's a funny thing about the second Cromwell, Oliver, that there was a tremendous reaction after his death. His son, Richard, served as a Lord Protector for, a couple of years. And then the monarchy was restored, and many of those who had supported the Cromwells sort of looked sheepish and, no, what are you talking about? I never supported the Cromwells. They were tyrants. His body was dug up when he was executed, despite being dead. Oliver Cromwell. Both the former Cromwell, ultimately executed by his king as a traitor and heretic, and the latter Cromwell are strange figures for an alleged conservative. Oh, no, they're not. And member of Her Majesty's Order of the Companions of Honor, no less, to invoke as role models. Even those who believe Oliver Cromwell was right to defend the privileges of the House of Commons against a king accused of having absolutist tendencies generally regard him as a prime example of the dictum that absolute power corrupts absolutely, given he ultimately assumed the essentially dictatorial role of Lord Protector for himself and passed it on to his son, like the modern-day Kim family in North Korea. In addition to being part of a movement that saw many royalist statues and much religious iconography, including monumental crosses and stained glass windows, destroyed, Cromwell banned Christmas and Easter and waged a bloody campaign of repression, described as genocidal by some in Ireland, with his regime proving so unpopular that after monarchy was restored, he was dug up and posthumously hung in chains and decapitated, with his head displayed on a pike alongside those of other regicides. Hey, let's talk about an American conservative, one of the leading American conservatives. That would be David A. French, who's not a conservative. Actually, he calls himself a classical liberal, and classical liberalism is godless by design. But he has a new piece. A nation of Christians is not necessarily a Christian nation. We cannot equate Christian power with Christian justice. How long ago was it that America was a Christian nation? Seems rather receding the distance. If it's hard to think of the worst image, but the picture below, which combines the Christian flag with the American flag and the Trump flag, almost perfectly captures the syncretism of Trumpist Christianity. I've written at length about Christian nationalism generally, Christian nationalism in the United States. That's right up there with systemic racism. and the specific version of Christianity that was suffused throughout Trump's effort to steal a national election. But I want to write about something a bit different, about the definition of a Christian nation, in the sense that America is or was a Christian nation that is now moving to a post-Christian future. Well, it'll become increasingly difficult for faithful Christians to find a home here and to feel welcome in their own communities. The idea that America is moving from a Christian past to a post-Christian future isn't precisely Christian nationalism. Oh, we can't even regret this. But it does lend an enormous amount of emotional urgency to Christian political engagement. But let's unpack those thoughts. Stop using that word. Is America a Christian nation? Has it been a Christian nation? I know that's a lot to unpack. Stop using that word. One essay can only scratch the surface. No, but you're scratching the surface. Previously, you were unpacking, trying to get your mixed metaphors straight. So, according to David A. French, a challenging reality, Americans have become more just and thus closer to the ideals one expects of a Christian nation as white Protestant power has waned. Well, David A. French is putatively a white Protestant. Down with me, he says. So how many wedding parties need to be bombed halfway around the world for America to become a more just nation? How many drag queen story hours have to be performed for kindergarten students before America becomes a more just nation? Because David A. French has infamously lauded drag queen story hour is what, a great blessing of American liberty or some such. This fellow is a fifth columnist. That's all that he is. One of his clowns didn't get the Republican nomination in 2016, and he had a hissy fit. And it's had, to what extent is, David A. French even a Christian? Herman Cortez on Twitter says, the conservative case against white people, the ultimate David French article. Guillaume de Nogaret commented, you could even say principled conservative case, the principle being maximum sanctimony and cuckedness. Sailing Girl 73 commented, is America more just for a working class that resembled post-Soviet Russia in deaths of despair? Is it more just because the birth rate has collapsed? 50% of women are on antidepressants. Imagine calling the destruction of people who built America justice, breathtaking evil. I think that's a pretty good way to describe movement conservatism, a breathtaking evil. As you noticed, I didn't go into Music Monday. I will do that tomorrow, and I will talk about Donald Fagan. Let's have a final look at the chat. Weird, if whites are the enemy, he ought to be preaching that we love them, says True Greenbird. I can't wait. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. These people are cuckoo, says Don Willis. When I hear the name Cromwell, I reach for my Jamesons, says Hauper. Yes, Irish, the diaspora Irish, and they love their Guinness. You know what they used to call Guinness in Catholic Ireland? The Protestant Porter. Morrissey hates Cromwell's guts, says Oscar Toe, as he might. Yes. I can't fault Johnny after seeing these Amber Heard Rum Diary screenshots. Not at all, says Oscar Toe. Dr. Deadname says, when I hear French's name, I want to break furniture. Kevin said that bit about Cromwell being dug and executed as if he approved, says Anne Run. Well, I'm looking forward to the cadaver synods for several dead popes soon enough. Look up cadaver synod. It's pretty good. Don Willis says, I see where Matt Walsh got kicked from Twitter. Jokin666 says he sent the Irish to Barbados to cut cane. Indeed. I can use my high tea to red pill Amber Heard and make her a trad wife, says Oscar Toe. Amber Heard is gorgeous. So, she is. And evil. Well, the gorgeous part. Yeah. Oscar To agrees with me about Melanie Jolie. And so glad you used the word histrionic. It is the dominant mass formation, says Rescue Steve. And kabuki actors are histrionic. This is a positive in that genre. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up right now. As mentioned, I'll be talking about Donald Fagen on Music Monday, Delay Today tomorrow. Let's look at what's coming up on Theater Thursdays. On January 13th, I am going to discuss Jean Cocteau's 1946 classic La Belle et la Bête. On January 20th, John Patrick Shanley's 2008 film Doubt. On January 27th, the film that I saw more than 50 years ago, which delighted me at the time. In 1969, Basil Dearden's The Assassination Bureau. It's got spies, old-timey spies and hot air balloons, and Diana Rigg in it. On February the 3rd, a silent classic from Victor Sjöström, The Phantom Carriage, and on February the 10th, Adrian Lyne's film about troubled teenage girls called Foxes. Too long didn't read. Don't take drugs, kids. And in the book club, on Friday, I'll be discussing Joseph McBride's biography of Billy Wilder. By popular request, on January the 21st, I'm going to be discussing, this is a book I discussed on my old podcast with Kevin Steele, Anthony Burgess's The Wanting Seed, which is about a world, 1961 it came out. It's a world much like our own, where homosexuality is extolled and heterosexuality is not exactly banned, but close. It's sapiens to be homo, is one of the slogans. On January 28th, I reviewed several books by the English scholar and journalist Dominic Sandbrook. And on January 28th, I'm going to discuss his book, The Great British Dream Factory. On February 4th, I'm going to talk about Christopher Lash's The Revolt of the Elites. And on February the 11th, a haunting novel by Joris Karl Huisman called Là-bas, or Down There. On January the 17th, I'm going to talk about one of my very favorites, artist and musician, Peter Blegvad. On January 24th, I'm going to be talking about Joy Division. On January 31st, I'm going to discuss the world music of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. And on February the 7th, I'm going to be discussing ABBA, the music machine. So thank you all for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show and would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via interact@kevingrace@shop.ca. So, as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.